We'd like to welcome today Helen Pettis. Did you say that? Yenna Yin. And Sue Pratt. And John Wright. So they're going to be speaking about their experiences and tell a little bit about themselves. And so we're going to start. So, Helen.
So, good morning. My name is Helen Pettis. I have lived in Greenfield since September of 1999 when my son was 6 weeks old. He is now 20, so we've been here quite a while. Have had some good experiences over the years, also some very negative ones. Such as, it's very disheartening to get out of my car on Main Street, to cross the street to go to the post office, and a vehicle flies by me and I'm being called nigger. I grew up in Jamaica. My mother was Danish. My dad was Jamaican. I grew up in Jamaica. I knew nothing about racism. I got to this country and the word nigger seems to be thrown in my face every time I turn around. I've had some serious questionable experiences out here just based on racism. For example, I've walked into Wilson's department store and I've instantly felt like, okay, so she's here to steal. Let's just watch her around the store. So I walk out and I don't buy anything and I've never returned. That happened once and that was once too many. Another experience I had a few years back, taken my son and two children from my neighborhood. My son and I were going to Family Dollar, and so these two children went to Big Y. I had no idea what they were going to Big Y for. They were coming along for the ride because we were going that way. And about 10 minutes after my son and I were in Family Dollar, I looked up and there were two Big Y employees with their name tags on, looking at me. And there was a male and a female, and the male looks at me and he says, "Did you send these two girls in the store to steal for you?" Now, these two little girls, they're not my children, they're from my community. Apparently, they had gone in there and stolen cosmetics. I don't even wear cosmetics. But, the fact that this is how I was approached was upsetting, because why would you even just approach me like that? Did you send them to steal for you? Who does that? That's another issue. I've had members in my community where, I saw a few weeks back, one of my neighbors down the hill, it was very early in the morning, and his music was very, very loud. I just went to his door, I said, "Can you please turn that down?" And I was told to go back to my effing country if I didn't like his music, so I basically reported that behavior to my landlord, and her response was, "You should consider the source." To which I responded, there is no source that justifies racist behavior. There is no source that justifies that. And when you as the person who basically is the property manager, if this is your response, it basically is telling me that you're condoning this behavior because you're not doing anything about it. And so my son and I are left to feel unsafe with these types of people walking around. As far as the public school system goes in Greenfield, I had two children who went through the public school system, and neither one of their experiences were positive. My daughter, who graduated Greenfield High School in 2002, she was, two of her teachers used profanity when, speaking with her, and this was done in front of the class. Each time I would go into the school and speak with the principal, who basically kind of brushed it off. When my son got to the high school, a teacher, one of his Spanish teacher was upset with some student in the room and threw a textbook across the room at the student that he was upset with, but the book hit my son in the head. And when I learned about this and I went to the high school and I was attempting to have a conversation with Donna Woodcock, who I have absolutely zero respect for at all as a principal, she basically blew me off. She said, well, this is something I have to investigate. And I basically just told her, I said, had this been reversed, had my son thrown a book across the room, he'd be arrested right now. You know, I mean, this is how you respond to a student, but the teacher is allowed to behave this way. My son was routinely called the brown kid. His name is Timmy Anthony Baker. Neither one of those names is Brown. And this is how teachers who are educating students out here, this is how they refer to black kids. Wow. That brown kid over there. When my son was in the middle school and he was repeatedly being bullied by one particular student, and I was on the phone every single day talking with Mr. J, who was the floor leader. This man told me one day, his specific words were, you need to realize that your son is a student of color here. What that meant, I really don't know, but what I felt he was implying was, you know, get over it. I mean, and when I spoke to my mother, who was with us at the time, you know, my mother, who grew up in Denmark, and I mentioned to her, I said, this is what this man said to me. She says, and what exactly is that supposed to mean? Is he entitled to substandard education because of his color? Should you just put up with this behavior because of his color? Why? I mean, it's almost as if this man was trying to enlighten me that my son was a black kid. I mean, I think I knew that. But this is how, when you have, teachers who are reckless and out of control. And what I said to the principal that day when my son was hit in the head with the book, I said, so if the teacher is the adult in the room and the teacher is supposed to set the tone for when the teacher behaves like this, what exactly do you expect from students? I didn't get an answer. Never got an answer. It just felt to me as if, okay, my son, when he was being bullied, no one ever saw anyone, stick their leg out and try to trip him or elbow him no one saw that. However, on the rare occasions when he did get frustrated and retaliate, well, he's violent. That was the word that was used all the time. He is violent. And I said, no, you will not. You will not put that label on my kid. Because he doesn't go around hitting people. He gets tired of being hit and the fact that no one does anything about it, but somehow the eyes are on him when he does retaliate. So, as far as the public school system in Greenfield goes, I have zero faith in the teachers. I have zero faith in the administration. I actually ended up pulling my son out of the public school system when he was in the 9th grade, after he was hit in the head with that book. And when I pulled him out and I requested all of his records, I said, I'm signing him out of this toxic, abusive environment. I will not have my child calling me every day, crying, begging to be homeschooled. And then I'm hearing, you're hearing in the news about kids who are being bullied and they go home and they kill themselves. That was not going to happen with my kid. So I pulled him out. And what happened? They reported me to DCF. Yeah. And I had a DCF worker come to my house and she says, well, you've been reported by Greenfield High School for, taking your child out of the school system. And I basically told the lady, I said, I send my child to school to be educated, not to be abused verbally and or physically by any teachers. I mean, they're there to educate, not to be abusive. And not to bully my child and to make him feel like he is less than anyone else in the classroom. And, I told her, I said, before you come in here and attempt to tell me what you're going to do with my child, you're really not going to do anything because I do have the right to protect my child. So of course she did the let me check your house, this, that, and the rest. You know, my child didn't need for anything. He needed a safe place to be, and the school classroom was not it. So I removed him, and you know, just something incredible happened, because before I pulled my son out of the school system, he was a very big kid. And I used to look at him and think, there's no way you can be that hungry, eating like this all the time. It was emotional eating. Because within 6 to 8 months of him being out of that toxic environment, and I had then enrolled him in online school, he had lost about 60 to 80 pounds because he was motivated to do something. And I just saw a complete change in this kid who now felt like, okay, so I'm worth something. I'm not being berated every day. You know, I'm not, you know, in this hostile environment where if I open my mouth, I'm, you know, stomped. So, but then even the online school did not work after a while because he became frustrated. He felt like he was basically instructing the instructors. So I pulled him out of that. I said, well, we've got to do something. This needs to be completed. And I ended up putting him in the literacy project, and his diploma is dated February 7th of 2017, when the rest of his classmates that he started GHS with, they graduated in June. So he basically graduated 4 months ahead of everybody else. And I really truly believe that this happened because he was no longer in that toxic environment. He felt, you know, I no longer heard the complaints every single day. I don't want to be here. I hate it here. You know, and he was motivated to do instead of just complaining all the time about what was going wrong. So, however, as far as the post-secondary schools here in Greenfield, as far as I went through GCC myself, now that I do feel was an extremely positive experience. I had been out of school for, I don't know, 20, almost 30 years, and I went to GCC, and the environment was welcoming. The instructors, I just felt like, my God, you guys need to be in the public school system. You really do. Because whatever they're doing over there is not working. And it was just very welcoming, very encouraging. A lot of support was there. And, you know, just you know, available, just there, you know. And so I ended up getting out of there, graduating, and going on to UMass, which was another good school in my opinion. But yeah, I really do hope that in time or soon I should say, that the school system here changes. Because the fact is, in the 20 years that I've been in Greenfield, when I first came here, there were probably 5 black people walking through Greenfield. Now, there are many brown babies, as these people call them, okay? And pretty soon, those are the children who are going to be walking the halls in the school system. And if these teachers, if their attitudes towards children of color is not changed, it's going to be detrimental. It really is, because there is to me, there's a huge connection when you have a fostering environment that, you know, is there, it makes you feel safe. If you're not feeling safe, you're not going to be engaging in learning. And if you're, you know, everything that you say is, well, it's not good, it's wrong, it's this, it's that, what's the point? You're not going to be, you know, there's no incentive to try if whatever you're going to say is not valued. So, as far as healthcare, ageism, I haven't really noticed anything that I can really put my finger on from my personal experiences, but the healthcare system out here, I personally don't feel like when I go to the doctor that my concerns are taken seriously. I have a knee injury right now that I've had since June. I don't limp for no reason. I'm in pain. I've gone to the ER and I've been told Tylenol, ibuprofen. I'd be eating that for breakfast and lunch if I followed their, you know, I've gone to, they did x-rays, and I'm telling them there is something wrong. So it gets to the point where I get that there is this opioid crisis, but I'm not in here seeking pain pills. I'm in here trying to figure out what's wrong so we can address it and move on. And hopefully at some point I'll stop being in pain. But every time I go to the doctor, there is this attitude of, oh, you know, Tylenol and ibuprofen, and in the back of my head I feel like I'm not being really listened to. Because when I tell you I'm in pain and this is what I'm explaining to you, and it's basically a brush off. So that's extremely upsetting to me. My son and I have chosen not to get flu shots. That's our personal choice. However, when I go to the doctor here again, I'm pretty much being made to feel that, well, you know, an irresponsible parent would do that. I am a responsible parent. And for 2 years, my son had really, really bad reactions when he had flu shots. And he was sick for 26 days after the second flu shot. And we made the decision that we'd never do that again. And so now what I'm finding is, because my son is over 18 and I no longer have to be in the room with him, and he tells me, he says, Mom, as soon as you leave, I'm being pressured to get the flu shot. To the point where he said that one nurse told him, oh man, I was trying to make my quota. Are you serious? I don't know, maybe she, you know, didn't realize she was saying that out loud, but that's exactly what he said to me. He says, Mom, the minute you left the room, after you specifically said, no, we're not doing flu shots, she brought it up. And when he said, my mom already said no. Oh man, now you're gonna mess up my quota. So is this flu shot for my son's benefit, or is it for your quota? So, yeah, I just feel like the healthcare system is just very broken. I feel like just when I go into the doctors and my concerns are not being addressed, and they are being brushed off as if I'm in here seeking pills, or I'm not seeking anything but an answer to what's wrong with me. And when you dismiss what I'm saying, it's extremely upsetting, because then if I get angry, then I'm the angry black woman. So it's like, okay, so if I come in here meek and mild, you're not listening to me. I ramp it up a little bit because, okay, now somebody needs to listen to, then okay, so now you're this angry black woman who's coming in here with all of this anger, and that's how I'm treated. So, you know, I deal with these things on a daily basis. You know, sometimes in the grocery stores. I mean, in Big Y, I was in line one day, and when it came time for me to be checked out, the person who was the cashier, he is an assistant store manager. And I'm observing him as I'm behind the person that he's taking care of, and he's chit-chatting. I get up there is not a hello. That's fine, whatever. But then he starts talking over me to the other cashier, and I called him on it. I said, excuse me. You know, I'm not asking for, you know, you to wish me well and all of that, but I feel it's very rude that I'm standing here and you're talking to someone over me. Oh, I'm so sorry. And so what I've started doing is, instead of just getting angry at everybody who does something that, you know, annoys me, I feel like it's my responsibility to just vocalize things in hopefully in a non-aggressive way. Sometimes it does end up that way, because, you know, there are some people who will attempt to make it seem like I'm making up things. So I've become very vocal, because there's one thing my mother told me. She says, you know, people are not mind readers. So if there's something that bothers you that someone does, it's your responsibility to bring that to their attention, because for me to just walk away and be angry, that doesn't solve anything. It's not really going to help anything. If anything, it'll make me angry and probably, you know, take it out on someone else inadvertently. But I just hope that at some point that Greenfield becomes a little more enlightened to you know, what people of color deal with on a daily basis. Because when my child, I mean, when I hear you know, it's upsetting to me to see teachers who are paid to educate. You know, they're the people who are going to educate your children to send them on further in life. And when there is that kind of, you know, a brown child, or, you know, there's a lot of students in school who, in the last few years, because of this political administration, I won't even mention that idiot's name, however, there are a lot of students who have told me that they have been picked on since this administration began. And picked on in a way as if, you know, oh yeah, you can go back to your country. I was born here. You know, and this is what a lot of these kids are saying, you know, why all of a sudden am I this foreigner because I'm black? And that's the attitude that, you know, is pervasive in the school system and from a lot of the students that I speak with on a daily basis. So I'm hoping that at some point this ends, because it's not good for children. I mean, I see little babies, you know, there are children who have no problems playing with other children, regardless of what their colors are. And then, you know, someone gets it in their head that, okay, well, you can't play with that one over there because they're the little colored kid. They're not a colored kid, they have a name. I mean, and I've always said to my son, you know, I said, you know, just the same as someone calls you the colored kid, what if you just went outside and found that white kid over there? I mean, that's offensive. So I'm hoping and praying that this gets changed for the better at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yana Yi. Now we know all the routines, and then I can come upstairs here on the stage looking for C. So I agree everything what Helen said, and one of the best things, and I'm Korean. I guess, yeah, I'm still Korean. I'm here since 1970, not here in this country. But still, you know, because of the appearance. Thank you. Because of the appearance, the stereotyping applies to all of us, regardless, like Helen said. And I really agree with Helen for her being Jamaican with a father, with a mother from Denmark. So she has not experienced the racism. So me too. I was a Korean, like as I'm still Korean. So I have not experienced under the racism because Korea is pretty much homogeneous, mostly, and the way I grew up anyway. But then, you know, we have a pervasive classism. So when a lot of us come here talking about discrimination, it's based on classism, because in classism, we are also kind of categorized, like I'm a little bit darker. So if you're darker, that means you become like a field slave. And if you're, you know, whiter skin, then it's more like, you know, house slave. So anyway, so I've been here since 1970, and I lived in Hawaii for 14 years. And after that, we were in, and after that, traveled different places. I had a white husband, and I have 2 children, 2 hybrid kids. So when I was living around the white husband and the 2 hybrid kids, so I didn't, you know, I was it's easier, even though they say, like I didn't like to be part of they called us Yankees when we were in New Zealand. So I'm not far from Yankees, none of us were Yankees. But you know, labor goes with the whole human story, and so I cannot really complain. But when I became single and I was living by myself and I was trying to find a job and making living, that's when it's like tire hits the road. And I came to live here. I was to begin with because my son went to Amherst College. It's closed, so I went to Vermont and lived there. White state, but it's relatively safe. I didn't have to worry about being bombed or called names. And then I came to Massachusetts in 17 years ago, and I was trying to find a job and living. And when you go into the market, and that's when you start getting a lot of competition. They have certain stereotypes that I should be doing. I should be polite. I shouldn't be educated, and I shouldn't be knowing anything. I should just know enough to clean the floors or clean the toilet. And so I was in a CSO Ethel office working as a clinician, and this new therapist was hired, so we knew she was coming. So I was in the receptionist office, and I was walking out, and she was coming in, and then I knew her name, and I knew there was a new therapist. So I said like, hi, and she just dismissed me, just dismissed me completely, and then she just looked at me like, I cannot talk to her because somebody who might be cleaning the office. And then so I came down the hallway, I sat in my office, and then when she was passing by, she was surprised I had my office. So and then she came back, and she was very nice. All of a sudden, started rubbing my shoulders, and then she said, oh, I am EMD, means eye movement desensitization. I'm the EMD certified, so I can, if you turn over all your clients, I will fix them, and then you can, I will return them to you. I said, what? She's like, do I understand this right? Or I didn't say anything. I was like, what? I mean, that was sort of like a typical way of being treated in a lot of ways. And we have the same degree, and we have the same licensure. And she might have some kind of a little bit of a specialty, but I have my own specialty of a cultural experience of my own. So, I mean, that's what therapy is about. The person talking to another person. It's not, I mean, like, it's like having another specialty is more like, do I drive a BMD, expensive car, or are you driving Honda? So that does not determine the person, or that does not determine how I get to a place. So I think we are so focused on those kind of little mediums, how you get there. And when, like we always say, the kind of work I'm doing is about the relationship. And we build a relationship in many ways. And so I kind of feel like I was being always put into the certain corner saying, your circle does not fit in our square because we're supposed to be approaching this way, not this way. But then, you know, we are people. We have many different ways of approaching things. So I think I was being undermined in a lot of ways. And then I lived in luckily safe places like here, and then like in Vermont, you know, very white. And in Vermont, because it was so very white, and people are nice, I don't know, whatever that means, nice. So I was able to start Asian American Community Coalition founded in Middlebury, Vermont, and where Middlebury College became a lot of sponsors for a lot of things what we are doing. And that was, that helped us brought a lot of Asian communities all around through these mountains in Vermont. So that was a fun thing to do. And also people look forward to it, and we were energized to do the things, reaching out into the mainstream of community. And so but even though I live in a kind of safe place, in some ways it's supportive. Like Helen said, some of the experience of her life was supportive, and some of the experience was negative. And I think that applies to all of us. And when I think I was kind of my track is kind of running up a little bit. And so one of the health care insurance situations we are talking about, and when I, in CSO, I worked there for 5 years, and then I've been in private practice for the last 15 years. And then for being in private practice can be kind of isolating. So I thought maybe I'll go back to CSO for maybe 1 day a week. And so they were really pressuring me to join this, they called it racism training. So I said, so what do you really do? I can't imagine them doing a race. They are a pretty white organization. What do they really do? So the things I got from them was, I guess, apparently the trainer or whoever they called be on TV. They do through TV, and so people can ask. So all the clinicians bring out the case from on their caseload, and mostly the people are encouraged to bring out the case like people of color who has having a difficulty to working in mainstream. And one of the cases they were talking about was this particular clinician brought issues about Latino man. And the way I gather it is like more like, sounded like teaching the clinicians how to write a treatment plan for this particular person of color, how to be white, or how to act like white. We cannot be white. How to act like a white. And I think that's not really treatment. And like I said, the whole work, what I do is about building relationship. And that's what our foundation of love, that foundation of our justice. And knowing the differences. We may not be able to fix it, but we acknowledge and then we accept. And accepting the difference is not necessarily the person is bad, we are just different. I mean, the water in the pond is not any different than water in the stream. They are the same elements. That's what we are. We are all in the same elements. So as far as healthcare goes, I think overall the healthcare system in Massachusetts in particular, I think that's very good. But I think in general, when you're talking about the treatment for the people of color is how it differs. My mom died of lymphoma in Florida. And since then, I was reading researches. And people that are people of color with a major illness go to hospital has more likely to die than white people. Because a lot of research is based on the results of the white people. But look at the psychological findings. Mostly white, mostly students in college to get their one-on-one psychology credit, and mostly women. So that's a kind of you kind of really wonder, and for me to work through that system as and a lot of times I don't really agree. It's like, how does that work? Because I was brought up by mother and my grandmother, so the male figure was not prominent in my life. And so, anyway, my mom died of lymphoma, and she was, I don't know, I was living here, and she was in Florida, so she told me about the things. I said, well, did you go see doctor? Did you talk to doctor? She was saying, oh, I'm really okay now, but then I think she was in really dire situation. She was something about her, she was quite afraid to go see a white doctor. And finally, I think one day when she went to see doctor, they sent her straight to the hospital. And then they had a first chemotherapy, and one chemotherapy killed her. And she lost all her hair. She lost all her immune in her system. And so by then I was in Florida. And so I asked the doctor, how is it possible? Just one therapy. I mean, like, you couldn't put the Band-Aid on because her skin comes off. And just really, and I said, like, so I asked him, I said, what happened? And then his first response was, I used exactly the same amount of a chemical based on her weight. So the thing is that, after that I studied, and a lot of studies coming from West Coast, that's where the Asian communities are there. So they were saying that because of all these findings, research is based on the majority of a population based on white people. And then the body was built on people, their diet based on fat-rich and protein-rich diet is so much different than fiber, and we are a different kind of diet. So my mom was definitely having a different kind of a dietary system that built her what she was. So, and then the doctor was really, scolding me because, like I said, I was asking the questions. So what he was saying was, I did everything right, but I said, I just want to know what happened. I don't understand it. So he was very, very upset with me, and finally I kind of confronted him, and then he said, well, you go find another doctor. And I told him, yes, I will do that. Don't worry. And then he came back and said, I think we should work together. So I said, like, well, whatever. So I went to and then the follow-up, and then she was sent to home, follow-up visit when I was in the waiting room. And so my mom was so happy. It's like coming out of the hospital and for the first time, and so she wanted to go out, so she kind of dressed the night. It's in Florida, so dressed the light. And I didn't really have an experience, so she lost most of her hair already, so she put this cute little hat. And so it's like we're going out to shopping or going to lunch thing. So when we went to the hospital was freezing cold. At the hospice was so freezing cold. My mom was just she was just shivering. So I finally, I had to go around looking for blanket. I said, can I? And then of course they put you in this waiting room, and this woman died after that, shortly after that. And so I was running around looking for blanket. My mom is freezing. Can you find the blankets? And so it's like I guess it's just, I'm not really sure. We are part of the numbers, like Helen said. It's like it's statistics. And if we are made differently, well, so I understand this is, based on white people, but then if there's enough research there, if especially somebody asks for that, and I think they would be at least receptive for that. And I kind of feel like it's that's lacking. I think Helen said the same thing. So another thing that before I wrap up, and then I had experience in, in this nice place, like I live in Coleraine, Sherman Falls is our metropolitan city, and so Sherman, the senior center, everybody loves there, and I was doing a few things. And then like a while ago, this writing group, and I don't know what happened. She was saying, I didn't know this is the right day for you to be here. I'm not really sure why. So I was like, because this is not a diversity day. That's what I was going to think. But then, well, Sharon Falls, there's no diversity day, right? That's a white day every day. So anyway, I didn't go there. And then it really kind of stayed with me. So I went over, addressed this issue with the director. And she said, well, nobody complains here. I have many, many programs. I guess no Asians are coming, or no person of, hardly any person of color is coming. So anyway, I think Helen already mentioned it's not being heard. And then, so by the majority not hearing the minority, turning the minority really into the sliver of another minority. That's how I feel. We get smaller and smaller. So I don't know. I mean, my children didn't go to school here, so I cannot really compare. And then I like UMass. I haven't gone to school there, but then I do a lot of things through UMass. And so that particular things, I don't particularly have complaints, but I think in general, it can be, heard. Though this place is not that big, so that I never had a program. I think one person comes addresses it in this very white people place. I think that can be. I can at least look at it. Thank you.
Hi. And my name is Don Wright. And I'd like to begin by saying that I've been in Greenfield actually since like 1990. When I first came here, I used to work in a group home. Actually started what is now ServiceNet, but before that was Meridian. And so I worked, in these group homes, and back then I was probably the only person of color, that worked. And I came from a place where we transitioned from the state school, Belchertown, to community, and so I worked in the state hospital for many years. And then when the world began to accept people with disabilities, they moved to community. And that transition is the same transition that I grew up with. I originally come from Boston. I grew up in the south end of Boston, which is very close to Chinatown, close to the north end where the Italians are at, and close to South Boston where the Irish are at. And so I was surrounded by racism. And I remember as a young kid being told, go back to your neighborhood and don't come around here. And I remember all my friends in school, everybody was white. So I spent a lot of time in a white world. And I was raised that way, Like you look at me and you would never believe that I played hockey in high school. You would not believe that. You would not believe that I skied Waterville Valley, Loon Mountain. I've been to the Grand Canyon, spent 7 days hiking in the Grand Canyon. But to look at me, you would think I'm a basketball player. And I'm far from a basketball player. And those are the experiences that I've had. I spent a very short time after high school. I was going to become a fireman. So I was trained to be a fireman. Went to fireman school, got trained. That summer, I got involved with a bunch of guys, and that didn't work out for me. So I joined the military, like most young men out of high school. I joined the Navy, thinking, I don't want to go in the Army, because that's a lower class. I don't want to go in the Marines, because it'll make me angry. And so I joined the Navy. And then, I'm in the Navy, and then I joined submarines, which is very rare back then, in the mid-70s, for a black man to be on a submarine, because they think that we can't swim. So, but I had learned to swim because I went to camp every summer as a kid growing up. So I knew how to swim. But I happened to have a captain in charge at the time that believed I would not be a good fit for submarines. And so I proved them wrong, because I ended up being stationed in New Brunswick, Maine, at a submarine station. And after a couple of years, I left the military. Just way too racist for me. And I come from a racist community, you know, and watch it change, you know, from accepting people of color in the community. I was one of those guys that I spent my life in the suburbs, not in the city, and all my friends were white. So I learned to simulate myself to this world of white people. And so once I had a job working in Greenfield, and I worked on the suicide hotline out of Eastville. And so all I did was answer the phone all the time, people calling in crisis. And every once in a while I would get, "Are you white?" And I'd say, "No, I'm African American, I'm a black guy." "You sound white." They would say. I said, "Yeah, I know, but that's how I get along. That's how I got by. That's how I never had a problem. Except for when the police stopped me. That's when I started to have a problem." So I've gone through this system, this world, this time, and I knew how to simulate myself to situations that I encounter. And so today, I'm in Greenfield. I've been here probably going on 7 years. I'm back, I'm in Greenfield, you know, and I'm trying to figure out what can I do to be part of community, you know, and not to be a burden to community, and, you know, and not take from community, but to give to community, you know. And so there isn't that many people of color, so I had to settle with helping anybody, you know. I come from the place of, it doesn't matter if you're black or you're white, as long as you know what I mean. That's where I come from. You know, it doesn't make a difference to me, you know. A human being is a human being. And I need to learn and have learned to respect human beings, no matter where they come from, or no matter what they look like, you know. And it's in my nature, it's in some of our natures to pass judgment first. And then I find out, oh gee, you're just like me. Trying to make it every day, trying to struggle, trying to have clear thinking, and treat other people with respect and dignity. And I have to say that my experience here in Greenfield, people who think they're racist are not smart enough to be racist. Because I come from a place, I come from a city, I come from Boston, where racism was, growing up, was real. You know, I was one of those guys, I used to hide down in the back of the seat of the car when we would go to a certain neighborhood. because they didn't want the car to get stoned, you know, and I've done that many times. You know, I was fortunate enough to grow up when South Boston, Irish, you were not allowed to go to that community. You could not go there. You would be attacked. I have a younger sister, 3 years younger than I am. First year in busing in high school, they attacked the bus. The girl never finished high school, never went back. I was fortunate growing up that I had just missed busing. Busing had, you know, I was coming out of the 12th grade, so I didn't need to experience that. But I had experienced it, you know, as a young guy, riding my bike in a neighborhood where I'm not supposed to be, and them chasing me. And I had many of those experiences. But today, the world is changing. Acceptance of status, of what you have, can get you in the door. When I'm in Greenfield, helping people, supporting people in what they do, so I don't work for any agencies. I'm a grassroots kind of guy. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. If I can support you in what you're doing to change your life, that's what I do. It doesn't, there is no color for me to look at. I'm looking at the person that's a human being, just like myself. And that's hard. Because it's hard when you walk inside somewhere, and I've never been in Wilson's, so I don't know what it feels like. But maybe I should go try that and see what kind of response I get when I walk into Wilson's. I've never been in Wilson's, you know. But that, you know, that feeling, you know, and some people would say, it's not that way in Greenfield. Nobody's racist in Greenfield. And I got a list of stories. The most recent one I had was I was at Home Depot, returning some extra stones back to Home Depot. Went to customer service, said I'm returning these stones back. Customer service said that we will call down to the garden center and let them know that you're returning the stones. I get down to the garden center, I put all the stones back. I'm standing there, and I asked a woman, I said, you know, did they call from the customer service to inform you that I'm returning the stone? She said, no, they haven't called yet. So I'm standing there, I'm waiting, another 5, 10 minutes pass by. I go down to customer service and ask them, would you call down so I could, you know, so the woman can, you know, tell me that it's okay. So I go back to the garden center, I'm standing there, and the woman says to me, you look like an honest guy. You're free to go. And at the moment, it didn't dawn on me that those words that she said to me, that I was free to go, like it just brought back 200 years of someone telling me that I was free to go. And she smiled, and she didn't have a clue. She didn't have a clue of those words that she used that would offend me. You know, and then so I go to my friend's house, a white lady, you know, and I tell her, you know, what just happened to me, you know. And she begins to cry, you know, because she couldn't understand that those words that someone used today are so offensive. You know, and that happens to all of us. You know, because ageism, you know, like I'm getting old. I'm trying to deny it. But people are telling me I'm getting old. I can't hear, I can't see, I do things more slower, you know, life don't matter too much more now, I'm getting old, you know. I don't care about all these new phones. I got a new phone last week, I can't even operate it. So I just turned it off, you know, because I can't. I just can't, you know, because I'm getting old, you know. And so these, you know, all these isms that are coming to me, you know. And I still smile, though, you know, because I had a good life, you know, life has been good despite the way that other people are thinking when they see me, you know. I got stopped last night by a police officer, in Greenfield. And my headlight was out. I knew it. I saw him. He was coming. I said, and as soon as he drove past me, he saw I was black. He was going to stop me. And he turned right around, and he came. I drove all of them turners with one headlight. They stopped. I know, passed 3 cop cars. Did nobody stop me? Get to Greenfield, this guy pulls me over. You know, and he informs me first most. He says to me, "This is being recorded." And I said, "So you can't shoot me on TV?" And he laughed. You know, he said, "This is being recorded." And I gave him information, took information, you know, and I was right on my street at my house, you know. And then when he came back, now he was more friendly, because I was friendly, you know, or I was, well, I didn't have no warrants. You know, that's probably why he was friendly to me. You know, I didn't pull out my gun, you know, not that I have one, but the stereotype of what happens by being stopped by police. And I've been stopped by police like a lot, but I know what to do. Hands on top of the steering wheel, don't say anything wrong, you know, let him do all the talking, and to answer him, "Yes, sir," when you're done. I learned that. And I can honestly say, in my lifetime, I've never been beat up by the police. I have friends who have, because I know how to simulate with the police, with the world, with the system, you know. I advocate for a lot of people. And mostly people in this community that are white. I have a house in Greenfield. I got this house and decided to help people, support people. I don't want that word, help. Support people in community. And so one day I got a call from CSO. "Could you support this person for an evening?" Sure. Person comes to the office. I interview them in the office. I have a couple other young ladies, take her to the house, bring her to the house. Now she's still drunk. And so I didn't see her after I interviewed her at the office. The next day, as my regular routine, I go to the house, check on the house, see the women who are in the house, make sure everything's fine, and I go to the office. As I'm coming to the house, I see these cop cars in front of my house. I pull up, I come to the front door is broken off the hinges. I go inside, there's 6 detectives from Greenfield, 1 state trooper from somewhere else. I said, "What's going on?" They said that this woman says that I assaulted her. Thank God I had 3 white women who had taken care of this other woman inside the house, who defended me and said that Don has never been in this house in the last two days. He has not been here. So I was more upset that they broke my door, because I knew I was in a position to be right, you know, and that they were wrong. But then also my mindset was that they're just doing their job. A woman complained, they come to investigate, they kick down the door because they couldn't get in. They don't find me there, and they find 3 other women who had been living there for months, said that Don was never here. And so today, you know, I still somewhat carry that pain of that, you know. But I have to remember, you know, that when a white woman accuses a black man, it's different, you know. And then, nothing never happened after that. They never talked to me, they never called me, they never apologized, they didn't even fix my door. And when I went back to the station and asked about my door to the captain, he said, "I don't know what to tell you." You know, they had a warrant. No one didn't open the door. You know, but so today, you know, I don't hold that, you know, because I understand that they were doing their job, you know, the same way that Every day I do my job, you know, and that's to support people, you know. When you come knock on my door on Pond Street, I will let you in, and we will talk, and I know enough about the people in the community and support to try to help someone to go in a better direction. That's what I'm known for in Greenfield for the past 7 years. And it's about being able to know that someone supported me. Because I come from a place where I came out of prison, I had 2 trash bags, like most people that you see downtown in Greenfield. And I started with 2 trash bags. So I know the possibilities that there are in this community. I tell people all the time, you will not find as much support in this community if you go to Springfield, you go to Holyoke, you go to Worcester, you will not find it. There is support in this community. And it doesn't matter what color you are. As far as I could see, it didn't matter what color I was, because I ended up, you know, because I ended up in a place where I never thought I'm a black man from the project that owns a home. And so I'm thinking back when George Washington said, if you own property, that made you somebody, you know? So now, when the police stop me, I say, well, I want a house on Pond Street. And they go, okay, yes, sir. Have a nice day, the guy said to me. You know, because it's about status. As sad as it is, it's about status. Sometimes I drive my raggedy truck, and sometimes I drive my BMW. Depends on where I'm going, because it's about status. And in this society, that's so much the way that people, they judge you by that, you know. Not all of us, and we try not to. I try not to judge it by that, you know. Dr. King said, you know, that it's the content of my character is what I want to be judged by, not the color of my skin. And so I try to, every day, to build on my character and not the color of my skin. So when you talk to me on the phone, you're always going to get, sounds like I'm white, until you meet me. And so in Greenfield, you know, people, you know, ask me, why are you still in Greenfield? My sister, you know, she works for the federal government in Boston. Why are you still in Greenfield? There's nothing in Greenfield. Why are you still in Greenfield? I said, because I'm going to live longer in Greenfield than I will in Springfield or in Boston or in Worcester. That's why I'm in Greenfield. Because the change is happening. The young people are finding out that being able to understand a person of color, you know, these young kids in school today, you know, they bring home a black friend, you know, and the old man's freaking out, you know. But the kid is still, the young white kid is still pushing that this is my friend, doesn't matter who he is, that this is my friend, I'm sticking by him. And those of us who grew up around here would actually know that that's how it's changing, you know. You know, whether it's fair or not in the system, that's a different story. But young people are making that change. And so I want to be a pusher of people who help make that change. And so I just want to, you know, I can't speak on healthcare, and you know, because I don't like doctors, and I don't go to hospital, and they keep telling me, you know, for a guy 62 years old, I still look like I'm 50. So I'm doing something right about my healthcare. I'm doing it on my own, taking care of myself today, you know, and being able to figure out, you know, how not to hurt myself anymore, you know. But thank you.
Hi.
So I'm pretty humbled by these three speakers. I haven't had their experience with racism, and I say that I'm sorry that you have. My background is in healthcare and in elder care. So the ageism piece of it is what I'm prepared to speak to today. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I entered the field. So when I was 16 years old, I wanted a job. I had no experience. I had no skills for work that I was aware of. So I went to a nursing home. I applied for a job. Not only did they hire me, but they asked me if I could start then. So, you know, within a couple of hours of deciding I wanted to do this, I was hired and then in the bathroom with an old woman who was pretty deep into dementia. I was told to go in and help her get ready for bed. I had no idea what to do. Really no idea what to do. She didn't have a lot of verbal skills, but what happened in that little tiny bathroom was that she took care of me. She could feel my fear, and we laughed. You know, I had to have her get undressed. I'd never done anything like this before. And she, in her way, was taking care of me. So something happened to me. There was some kind of transformation that occurred. In that moment of intimacy and her vulnerability and my vulnerability, that was it. And that's where I've stayed, in elder care. In 1987, I'd worked in nursing homes. I was a healthcare worker, direct care worker. There were no regulations whatsoever. There were no standards. There was no oversight. And there was, I participated in the torture of old people. Didn't know it because I loved them and I thought I was taking care of them. I thought tying them up was keeping them safe. I didn't know these things. There was no training. So in 1987, standards came in, training started, and it became very task-oriented. So my whole career has been about caring for elders and hoping that we could improve the quality of care. I can tell you now, unfortunately, that after a lifetime of doing this work, that the quality is slipping. We haven't made the improvements that I'd hoped we'd make. Most of us don't like to think about aging. Most of us don't know how to talk about aging. We don't understand frailty, which is part of aging. That's what I came prepared to talk about today, but as I listened to others, I realized that I'm also prepared to talk about the workforce because I'm passionate about that. I don't believe we can possibly provide quality care without a quality workforce, and that's been my life's work. So after many different jobs in elder care and health care and not finding what I wanted, mostly because we've had, for decades, we've had the highest turnover of any industry in the direct care workforce. About 50 to 60% of the workers that enter the workforce will leave within a year. And they don't leave because they don't like their jobs. And they don't leave, they leave because the work is really hard. They don't make a living wage. They're not well supported. And often they leave because they're injured. They can't do the work anymore. So about 15 years ago, I created a nonprofit. It was then Fripp Memorial Foundation, now the Care Collaborative, and decided we needed to invest in training. I'd owned a home care agency and couldn't hire enough people who were educated to do the work. Because in 1987, it was determined that yes, you do need a little training to do this work, to care for frail elders. A little training meaning 75-hour standard training. Hasn't changed since then. We still need 75 hours. Massachusetts is one of only, I think, 7 states left in the country that adheres to that 75-hour standard. Most have increased it, but that's required. So I went to GCC after I created the nonprofit, spoke with Bob Barber, who was the director of community education, and said, why aren't you guys doing CNA or home health aid training? And he said, because it's really hard and we're not that good at it. We've tried, we've failed. And I said, well, I think I could be really good at that. I don't know how to do school stuff, so let's do that. So 15 years later, we're still doing the training at GCC. If you go to a GCC CNA home health aid training, you wouldn't know that it's this little community nonprofit that's supporting the training or providing the training. It looks like a GCC training. We're still there. I will tell you that when we started, Patricia Crosby, who is the executive director of the Regional Employment Board, she was at the table with us when we started having these conversations. And she said, you know, we need to work with the immigrant population to figure out ways to get support pipelines into training. And I said, because again of my white privilege, ignorant, I said, we really don't have that many people of color who want to enter this workforce here. And she said, oh yes you do, they're just not getting to the door. So she introduced me to Center for New Americans, and we created some entry-level bridge classes. And she was right. There were many people, not just people of color, but people who didn't know how to get to the door of GCC. They didn't see themselves as people who would enter a college training of any kind. So from then to now, we've graduated many, I don't know how many, I haven't counted, but we've had maybe 6 trainings a year for 15 years. We're still doing it, and we still don't have enough workers.
Wow.
Every single nursing home, every single home care agency is desperate for workers, desperate for caregivers. And I think that ageism is a big part of that. It's because none of us want to look at it. When we look at elder care, it's when we need it. That's when we look at it. I don't think most of you know that there are more more nursing homes in this country than McDonald's. I was kind of surprised at that because, you know, you see those big golden arches everywhere. You don't see the nursing homes. So if I ask this question of all of you right now, if you would please raise your hand, all of you who are looking forward to being in a nursing home someday. Yeah, that's what I always get.
Yeah.
But yet, half of you, fully half of you will experience that. And then when you do, you're not going to be very happy about it probably. And you're going to blame the people who show up every day to provide care for the lack of quality that you experience. So, as I said, as I listened, I'm kind of passionate about this, and there's plenty I'd like to talk about in terms of frail elders and aging, and I'd love to talk more about that at a different time. But right now what I'd like to talk about is this workforce, this population. So the statistics are somewhere between, any given day, 45 to 55% of our workforce is non-white, African American, Hispanic. And, oh, I've forgotten that now. I had a statistic and I have notes, but unless I put my glasses on because of that stuff, I probably won't be able to read it anyway. Something like 60% of that population are non-native, the immigrant population. So we're really facing a crisis with that. For example, the Haitian population in Eastern Mass is almost 50% of the workforce. We don't have enough. That's just the truth. But what I've experienced in my work with Center for New Americans and at GCC is that people from these other cultures understand caring. many other cultures don't experience the nursing home. We call this, in fact, an industry. When I look at the statistics, it talks about workforce development stuff, will say the fastest growing industry. Isn't that a little sad that caring for elders is our industry? And we're really not doing a good job. Last year in this state, 20 nursing homes closed, and they're looking at another 35 nursing homes right now that are in jeopardy of closing. And that's a lot to do with the Medicare, Medicaid rates. So that's all the stuff that was in my head that I was full up wanting to talk about. But I think it's enough to know that this is about ageism. If we were more comfortable with aging, if we were more comfortable with the idea of frailty, that there's something called multi-system frailty. That's what we call it in the industry. And it means old. It's really what it means. Multi-system frailty, which is what Don was referring to. You got to have the glasses, you're not hearing as well. These are the things that happen as we age. They're natural, they're normal. But we feel shame around them. We feel shame when we are not as independent and as able. And because we feel shame, we're less likely to reach out. And this is where this culture, I think, is otherizing everyone. The idea that we don't honor caregivers and say thank you for your service every day, I think is a shame. And the fact that we don't honor elders and appreciate the honor it is for us to support someone in their frailty. We don't know how to do that. We don't know how to negotiate that. But what I have found in working with the immigrant population through Center for New Americans is that many of them do. I had a young man from Ghana who was in one of my classes, a CNA class, and on the second day when I was explaining the work, what is this work, and that it's an industry, he was a little shocked at the idea of this industry. And he said, well, when my grandmother needed help, they just put my bed in her room. You know, it wasn't a big discussion, it wasn't a big health care issue. They just put my bed in her room and I helped her. That was the way it is. But we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to help one another. We don't know how to ask for help. In fact, I often think it's the greatest act of courage for an elder to accept care, to trust. And so where I got a little off was listening to everyone speak before me, is that I was thinking that it's an act of courage to accept care when you're white. It's it's beyond me to understand what that would be like if you're already marginalized walking into the system, whether it's the ER or the nursing home or opening the door to a stranger in your home. So I was a little thrown off balance by that. It's humbling. But what I will say is that when you're in that intimate situation, when you're invited into someone's vulnerability, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the amount of compassion, the connection that you can have. I have a good friend whose mother was in Amherst Nursing Home. This friend is a nurse. She worked in long-term care for years. Had great difficulty getting her mother, who had dementia, to accept any care. And there was one woman, she was from Nigeria, Tessa, and Tessa had to teach the other folks and the family how to get her mom to accept care. And so Kathy's mom, who had lost a lot of her verbal ability at that point, was always able to introduce Tessa as her sister. And, you know, and Kathy, very Irish woman, her mother was about as white as could be, and Tessa was a dark-skinned Nigerian woman. Didn't make any difference. She would introduce her as her sister. That's the way that she felt. And Tessa taught the family, who had known this woman her whole life and who loved her dearly, she taught her how to approach her in her dementia when she didn't recognize them, how to approach her and to care for her. So these are the things that I was thinking as I was listening. I don't have that. I haven't had your experiences. But I have had the experience of working with elders who are marginalized.
I'm Liz Kilmer. I'm 78 years old. I've worked as a social worker with older people for most of my career. I was hoping in coming that I would have an opportunity to hear from somebody who's old about what it's like to become the client that you were serving for most of your working years. And Sue, I love Sue almost more than anybody in the world, and very grateful for everything that you said, but it's really the other speakers who spoke from their own experience that really meant the most to me. When I worked for home care, Life Path now, the training that I remember the most, probably of any training of all the hundreds of trainings I've had, was when someone was wise enough to invite a client, a home care client who was 104 years old, maybe you were there, Laura, to talk about what it's like to be 104. I can talk about what it's like to go from the functional social worker, younger person in all the ways that we are, to an older person, how people relate to me, what my limitations are now, what it feels like. As the people who were on the panel talked about your own experience, that's what was most meaningful to me. And in a way, without being critical, it's some aspect of ageism that when it came to the old person, instead of having someone who's old talk about what it's like to be old in an ageist society, what it's like to incorporate the ageism that we incorporate in the society, and then all of a sudden that's us, it became someone who provides care. So I guess I would like to have another program about ageism and have old people be the people who talk about what ageism in the society is.
I'm going to answer something to that. First of all, when you see the people that were not white speaking, like you said, from their experience, a lot of us don't live that long. Okay, so that's a fact. That's just a plain fact. We do not live that long. So you'd have to dig someone up, from the grave if you wanted, Well, like last week, I was telling Shin, my grandfather died. He was 105 years old. Even him, and I was thinking about what Don was saying, he did not want to go to a hospital. He still refused because he's afraid if a white man touches him, they're going to hurt him further. Okay? They'll kill him. However, he had a son that is of more modern, the modern age, and he's, I'm going to take you to the hospital. He's going to die, he wanted to die at home, but he was going to die. But it's just like he went to the hospital, he died anyway, and then they were upset because he died. But the point is that it's a very rare occasion that we last that long. So, sorry. Oh, you won't be able to hear from, older black person, older than what was up there, basically. Okay.
Let's see if anyone,
Yeah.
does anyone want to comment on any of that? Please.
I think this ageism here in this country is it's a cultural barrier as far as I'm concerned, because a lot of parts of the world take care of their own elders. And also I had a neighbor who was 104 years old. She was living by herself. And then the neighbors, our families were very kind and very good. But she refused to have anyone moving into her house. It's a small house. It was perfect to have another person coming in. And her independence. I think in the higher argue of this culture, I think
Right.
independence rate higher than anything else. So I think that I find that in my community, in immigrant population, I think what happened is our first generation thinks certain way. Like my mom passed away before she moved in with me, but that was our big goal. We're gonna live together finally, because we haven't done that not too much in our life together. And so, but she passed away, but then it seems like it sort of ends there, and that the second generation sort of gets so assimilated into this modern independent cultural vein, so that it looks like it seems to be that kind of, I mean, it calls for economy and all these other things kind of supports that too.
So any more questions? Anybody else have any more questions? Another question? You can ask direct questions or comment on what someone has said.
I will try to bring it to a question. I became very aware of, in this conversation, that this part of this, not having the elders here, we're such a displaced culture. Most other cultures, people live near their family and they still have those bonds, and they still have a sense of the wider community and helping to take care of each other. And the problem since our invasion, the settlers, the people who came here and colonized and settled and genocided Native people and stole people from Africa away from their homes and family. So we are all displaced, except for the few Native people who've survived, who've also been displaced from their cultures, and yet still hold it, many of them do in some sense. So we've been deprived of that, and that the whole culture, everybody's displaced. So how can we rebuild those connections? So, yeah.
Anybody want to address?
Well, I think that,
Thank you.
so I think that we think about healthcare in terms of tasks, and I think relationship is really important. So I don't know how we rebuild. I can't answer the question at a larger level, but I think in healthcare, we really need to focus not just on the connecting with the person in the moment, that's important, but on relationships. And not that the tasks aren't important, but as someone who instructs caregivers, we place a great emphasis on the task and the performance of the task. And it's very one way. It's not very centered on the person receiving the care. So I don't know if that relates, but that's what occurred to me.
Just building on what Suzanne said, someone used the word othering, and I think that's what every speaker had in common. You know, they spoke to their experience of othering. And when I think of this, what we've done as a society, put everybody in a compartment and isolate them so that we don't collaborate and organize against the system that does this to us. It's horrifying. We're in little silos with the oppressor pressing us down.
I can have a kind of small kind of anecdote type of a story, about the isolation. I grew up in a more community-oriented situation. And so in our language, for example, and there's no word for my mom, it's always our mom. So I grew up as the only child. And when I talk to my other Korean friends, and then and end up saying, our mom, and I'm thinking, and then she says, our mom. So it's in Korean, it seems to be really okay. You know, our mom used to do this, and then she was like, oh yeah, our mom used to do this. And then as if we lived in the same, as if we have the same mother, and we don't have this. So these kind of isolation and independence, so highly valued here, has like deep roots. So I think people, it's not going to be quick fix, but I think it's very good place to stay. And then there's of course a lot of difficulties that these community-oriented societies face also. So there's both ways.
One more question, and then we have to close.
I just wanted to say something. It was years ago, I read a book about a woman who went to live in a sheikh's harem in Syria. Now, we have these ideas of what harems are, harem, or however you say it. But this was the wives of the sheikh, and this was a group of very hard-working women. And one of the things they did was to care for the elderly in the family. And the former sheikhs, many wives were still living, and these were very hardworking women. And at some point, the American woman was approached by one of the sheikh's wives, and she said, I heard the rumor that in America you put all your old people in buildings and leave them there. And it's just dawned on me at that moment when I read that we're sort of industrialized the care of our elders. You know, that's what a modern industrial society does. It works efficiently, you know, and at the least cost. And we've industrialized a thing that's a very human thing. And I just wanted to say that.
I think part of privilege, you know, that's the industrialized thing that you're talking about is a result of the so-called privilege. You know, there's a connection there. You know, I notice like in my culture, Don will probably say the same thing, is that we kind of stick with they die at home, you know, or they die real, you know, we just don't have that same mentality of putting your elder in a nursing home, and we'll do anything. People like Yenna was saying, your family takes care of people. And I think I don't know if it's upbringing, if people are bringing their children up to the point where it's like, you're so privileged you don't ever have to wipe somebody else's, you know, trash or, you know, whatever. You know, you're so privileged you don't have to take care of me. You know, that's something that one has to question. I see little kids, 5-year-olds growing up with, you know, the beginner's privilege stuff, you know. And so I just wonder if that is a result, what you're talking about, is that a result of being privileged?
You know, I would just like to say that I've considered it a privilege my whole life to be able to provide care and to be in the circle of caregivers. I don't know if you'll appreciate this, but when we talked about the industrializing of elders, I have a story that I promised myself 40, 50 years ago that I would tell. I worked at Amherst Nursing Home. Betty Kravitz was the owner. She was a very generous, wonderfully spirited woman. And she bought a Whirlpool tub, which was state of the art. Nobody had ever had anything like this in a nursing home. And it was done by a hydraulic. You bring them into this little tiny room, put them in this hydraulic lift, and dip them into the tub. Everyone hated it. They were terrified of this experience, especially anyone with memory impairment. So the story is, this one woman, Harriet, who I adored, she really traveled the world. She was a very intellectual, bright woman with severe memory impairment, but great vocabulary. She was very perplexed one evening. I asked her what was wrong, and she said she found herself living among people with the strangest custom she'd ever experienced, and it was dippings. And then she said, imagine at my age, stripped naked and dipped in a vat. And that's how she perceived it. It wasn't unpleasant, really, it just, she didn't get it. And I was thinking about culture and color and all of these things and task. That for me then, I thought of it as this task-oriented procedure, rather than what Betty had wanted it to be, was this wonderful luxury. And I think that, I'm not sure why that occurred to me, but this idea that even when we're trying to provide comfort, if we're doing it in a cold, other way, it's not successful.
So let's give them a big hand.